Well, hey there, Gracious Gang. It's time for the Gracious Guest Podcast. And I gotta say that this one is long overdue. And it happens from time to time. So I'm your host, Mike Kreeft, host of the Gracious Guest Podcast. And, really, which is, if you're not familiar with this is the podcast component, if you will, of a greater effort, a greater initiative that I do over at thegraciousguest.org, my website. So please check that out. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends. Let them know about it if you would be so kind. I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you get a chance and you could leave me a review, a nice review, hopefully, over at iTunes, that'd be handy. That really helps to kind of get the show boosted and out there. And what this show really is all about, every episode, is sometimes it's more obvious than some episodes it's more obvious than others, but it's all about wonder and, marvel and the human experience where we have some sort of connection point to the divine, to the transcendent, truth, goodness, beauty, the transcendentals. And if that sounds too philosophical for you, let me bring this down to earth. Have you ever, and you'll see that that's tongue-in-cheek because I'm going to bring it down to earth, but I'm also going to then show you just hopefully how this connects to something way beyond earth and things beyond what we can see. Have you ever been on a mountaintop or had some sort of really beautiful view and everything just froze and sort of in that moment you all of a sudden just instantly stopped worrying about work, what's going to happen to you, how much money you make, some fight you were having with your cousin last week, emails you forgot to send, tax forms you're late on, whatever it is, right? All those things in life that are, to a greater or lesser degree, important, truly, but that we blow out of proportion to other things in life that matter more. Or even, quite frankly, things that aren't important that we blow way, way out of proportion and give so much credence to and so much time to and attention to that we really lose sight of what's most important in life. And what's funny is a lot of times you can't really put into words what's most important. Or, it's difficult to express it. That moment when you have that sort of just look between you and someone you love very, very much, that just sort of says it all. Those scenic moments like I described earlier, something that just makes you press pause and think for a split second about more. Is there more? Is there more out there? Is there more to life than I can describe? Is there something, some purpose, some meaning to life? These kinds of questions that we may not sit around thinking about a whole lot, but they're there, and they're important, and the slightest thing can bring it up, can bring it to the surface, can tap into that, and that's what I try to focus on this podcast in different ways. And I do it in fun ways. I don't just sit here and share philosophy with you, although I will today a tiny bit. But it's in the context of a book review today for a book that I'm very excited to share with you for a lot of reasons. And the book is called Doors in the Walls of the World, Signs of Transcendence in the Human Story. And I'll have all the show notes, all the information in the show notes for you, so you can go check this out and pick up a copy if you'd like. And I suggest you do. It's not very long. It's 100 and, let's see here. I have the print copy in my hand here. It is 122 pages. It's pretty short. I got the Kindle copy as well, and it's not very expensive. So it's Dr. Peter Kreeft, who I've referenced on this program quite a bit. Dr. Peter Kreeft is a philosophy of religion is sort of his emphasis. But he's a philosophy professor at Boston College, where he's taught for decades. He's also, I think, been in residence, sort of, or a kind of visiting professor at numerous other colleges and universities. And Dr. Kreeft has written, 50 or 60 books. I lose count. So, and they cover all sorts of different topics in the sort of philosophy and religion category, in a sense. But he also engages through that, with culture, with history, literature, and he's just he's a true savant. I mean, in terms of just, when you listen to his lectures, you read his books, it doesn't take too long to really have it abundantly clear just how well read the man is. I mean, I think he's read everything. I mean, if that's possible. But at any rate, for someone who's such an absolutely brilliant man, I've always been very impressed with how clear he is and how down to earth he is. And in his lectures and his writings, he really has. I think he's very approachable. And honestly, I've probably learned more from Dr. Kreeft in philosophy and the philosophy of religion and how to compose good arguments and that kind of thing as well. In terms of making a case for the Christian faith in general and the Catholic faith in particular. And by the way, Kreeft is Kreeft, spelled like Kreeft, but Peter Kreeft. So, yes, Doors in the Walls of the World, Signs of Transcendence in the Human Story. What's this book about, and why am I sharing it today? It's kind of hard to describe what it's about, but in general, what he does, I'll tell you what, let me just share with you the description off the back here, just to summarize it. And this is great, because this passage right off the bat that he mentions from Shakespeare is one that I've mentioned on this program before a few times, because I think it's really at the heart of everything that I try to focus on here on the Gracious Guest Show. So he says, after William Shakespeare's Horatio sees the ghost of Hamlet's father and scarcely believes his own eyes, Hamlet tells him that there is more to reality than he can know or imagine, including ghosts. And the quote, by the way, if you remember from Hamlet, is, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophies. The description goes on, Hamlet's his statement suggests that the walls of the material world, which we perceive with our senses and analyze with our intellects, have doors that open into the more beyond them. And then it says here, philosopher Peter Kreeft explains in this book that the more includes the absolute good, the Platonic forms, God, gods, angels, spirits, ghosts, souls, Brahman, Nirvana, Tao, the will of heaven, etc., the meaning of it all, something that deserves a capital letter. I love that last part. At the core of this book, and he goes through the structure of it. Basically, is let's see here, it's 3 or I think it's 4 or 5 parts. He basically approaches it from the standpoint of human life. The human story is just that. It's a story. And it has the elements of any good story. That human life itself is not just something, not just some random, particle collision, accident of evolution. That there's a plot, there's a story, and that's what he starts off with. Part 1 is the plot, life as a story, and he shares 10 varying stories within that section that kind of get at that, all of which in a different way help you to think about, wow, like, my life is not random. It's just not. And even an ounce of analysis and reflection, it's abundantly clear. It's obvious that we're not just random. Part 2 is the setting, the fragility of time, and he really goes into the setting of human life and our experience here in this world and that kind of thing. Part 3 are the characters, real and invisible friends. He talks about that, God, angels, saints, extraterrestrials, even. He has a little interesting sort of Christian reflection on that. Part 4, the theme, and he argues that the theme of human life is joy. Now, I mean, right away, your eyebrows might go up. I mean, it's very interesting how he goes through the theme of joy and kind of goes into it knowing full well how all of us are tempted to just completely ridicule or deny that. Because we've all had different kinds of suffering that we've faced. We've all had challenges in life, some of us more than others, or some of us have had more devastating challenges than others in in our individual human lives and our families. And he goes through and unpacks that in a very interesting way. I don't want to give too much away, but I'll save one part of that for the end, I think, here. And then lastly, the style, part 5. The style of this human story is art. He talks about the purpose of art, its highest purpose. He gets into poetry, music, and architecture, and then ultimately Jesus Christ as the perfect paramount peak of artistic expression, in a sense, in terms of God's creation. And and the role that the God-man plays in that. So anyways, it's really, really awesome, and it's just a really neat book. It's kind of hard to describe. I won't belabor it too much here, so the bottom line here is just go get this and read it. It's pretty powerful, I think, and just very interesting and compact. And he talks about here, this is just neat. I want to share a couple quick things from the introduction. He's talking about different philosophies of life, and he basically goes through 3 of them. The sort of Shakespearean one at first, where, basically we can say, like with Hamlet, that there are more things in heaven or earth than we can dream of or that we can measure and that kind of thing. The idea that our whole life in this world, our whole life in this sort of plane of existence, this pitch of human existence, is essentially, to sort of reflect on the greater, the spiritual dimension, in a sense, that transcends everything. That there is more creativity, there is more power and magnitude and variety the higher up the level, the sort of ladder you go, rather than less. And that he makes some very interesting cases for that. He basically goes through here and he says the first philosophy and truest one, as he argues here, is Shakespeare's, which he puts into the mouth of Hamlet when he says to Horatio, "There are more things in heaven on earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy." This is, by the way, I'm just going to share with you page 12 from the book, because I think this is a good summary. It says, "Most great writers, poets, artists, and philosophers, all the saints and sages have believed this philosophy. All pre-modern cultures did. All children do, until they are educated," he puts it in parentheses, "they are educated out of it. Some never are, like Shakespeare and Plato and Dante and Dostoevsky." So that's philosophy 1, that this world, as filled with all sorts of mysteries and challenges and details as you can possibly imagine, this is just part of something much bigger. And the mystery, the true mystery, the transcendent, the stuff on the other side of the doorways, into the transcendent, into the divine, we can't even conceive of what's on the other side of that. And Scripture points that out too, that it hasn't even entered into the hearts or into the minds of man what God has in store for us. Like, we just literally cannot imagine even what God is, what he's capable of, how the magnitude of God. We can't even begin to imagine it. Then he says, the second philosophy, and again he's exploring 3, he says, the second philosophy is that there are not more but fewer things in heaven and earth, that is, an objective reality, than are dreamed of in our philosophies, that is, in our subjective minds and beliefs. That is reductionism, materialism, cynicism, nihilism, relativism, and subjectivism. So what he's doing too is he's trying to, there's different ways to do this, but Dr. Kreeft in this book, for simplicity's sake, is trying to bracket many prevailing kind of attitudes towards life and towards the world and towards, what constitutes morality and all those kinds of things into 3 categories, generally speaking. So that's the second one. And he says here, the third philosophy is that there is the same number of things in heaven and earth as in our philosophies. That is, as Hegel put it, that which is real is rational, and that which is rational is real. In other words, we are know-it-alls. What is inside our mind and what is outside match pretty much perfectly. To believe that, you have to be either a genius or very arrogant, or both, like Hegel. So anyways, and that's, Dr. Kreeft has, he has a real sense of humor, I think, that's pretty appealing. Just some of the way he phrases things are pretty interesting. And then he says, basically, that historically the first philosophy is traditionalism or pre-modernism. The third is modernism or rationalism, and the second is postmodernism or irrationalism. So that's all from the intro, and I know it's kind of long and drawn out, but basically the reason I want to mention that is that he's laying out the purpose of this, and he says this book is escapist. This is on page 19, as he basically is finishing off the introduction. He says, this book is escapist. It is about doors in the walls of the world, or the walls of Plato's cave, through which we can escape our imprisonment. And when you hear people condemn escapism, ask yourself, who hates the concept of escape the most? The answer is jailers. And then he goes on, but this vision is not escapist in any negative sense, because it does not diminish the world, but enlarges it. The world is not evil or illusory, it is real and good, but there is more than the world. That is the good news. Our world is more because it is less than all. It is more because it is a reflection of a far greater reality. This is not escapism, it is supernaturalism. Well, that's, in a nutshell, put so much better than anything I ever said on this podcast as far as what I'm trying to tap into here with, like, why do I do movie reviews and book reviews and talk about life experiences and just sort of muse on things to try to encourage a consideration of wonder? Well, it's for that very reason. It's because I firmly believe with everything I am, and I have so many personal experiences of this in my own life that I feel like I don't need to have it proven to me anymore. And I think a lot of us don't. I think we just don't talk about it a lot. I think we don't really reflect and press pause and make it an intentional effort to focus on those very things that can lift us up from all the misery and the terrible news cycle and all the hate-mongering that we all get into and the nitpicking and just the things we do, honestly, the things that we do that make life miserable. A lot of times I don't need the world out there to make me feel miserable. I just do it myself with the way I treat people, or if I'm just not paying attention to what someone else needs or that kind of thing, not showing people love. And that's really at the core of it. Nothing will fast track you in a sense to an experience of wonder and an experience of awe faster and more effectively than genuine love, which is way beyond a feeling or an emotional response or hormones or anything like that. So this is a quote. I'm going to share just a couple more quick things with you, and then I'll wrap it up. This is a quote Dr. Kreeft shares in the section on the plot of the human story, and he's quoting here heavily from Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, which is I haven't read it. I'm working my way through it now, actually, and but it's one of Dr. Kreeft's favorite books, that he brings up quite a bit. And this is from in that book, Father Zosima is sharing this character in the book is sharing this about the importance of love. And he says here, this is great, he says, "Love a man even in his sin, for that is the semblance of divine love and is the highest love on earth. Love all God's creation, the whole and every grain of sand in it. Love every leaf, every ray of God's light. Love the animals, love the plants, love everything. If you love everything, you will perceive the divine mystery in things. Love is a teacher, but one must know how to acquire it, for it is hard to acquire. It is dearly bought. It is won slowly by long labor. For we must love not only occasionally for a moment, but forever. Everyone can love occasionally. Even the wicked can." And that's dead on, right? I mean, that's the heart of the gospel of Jesus. I mean, that's the whole point of Christ's, ministry. One of his most central messages about, showing love not just to the people that I get along with, but even showing love to my enemies. And when Jesus says love your enemies, guess what? He's implying pretty strongly that there are actually enemies. And this is a problem I think we run into sometimes in our effort, which is good, our effort to try to see the best in people. Sometimes we fool ourselves and we think that just deep down, everybody just wants to be my friend. It's not true. Sin has wrecked us, and we need grace. And the bottom line is we can all fall into it potentially. We will meet people in life who are our enemies. True enemies, people who would, if they had the ability, even kill us, potentially, and not bat an eye, but we need to love them too. How do you do that? That's for a different show, okay? We'll get into that in more detail. But the point is this, that love is so powerful, so transcending, that kind of love is the kind of love that will help you open those doors, or I should say go through that open door that God is opening from his side, inviting us into a deeper recognition of the greater story going on around us, the story that we are part of, the story that each one of us in our own lives comes to realize, if we'll be open to it, that our own lives are not about us, that we are not the main character in our own stories. So I just want to wrap up with Food for thought here from St. Thomas Aquinas. Why not? The guy's awesome. Aquinas, among other things, this is kind of a composite here, and I've got a great article here from Joseph Pearce, who I love dearly. He's incredible. From Joseph Pearce over at The Imaginative Conservative, Joseph wrote this called Distracting Ourselves to Death. And this is an ongoing, kind of reflection that we see about some of the dangers we run into with our over-technologizing of our time and that kind of thing. So not to get into that, but I think this pattern here is really, really awesome, and this is right at the heart of everything Dr. Kreeft talks about in this book. In that St. Thomas basically shows us the beginning of wisdom and this ultimate experience of an unlocked human experience begins with humility. It starts with humility, of a recognition of the truth of who and what I am. All delusion aside, right? I am not God, okay? If I take an honest assessment of who and what I really am, and I'm truly humble, and I encourage that in myself, I accept that humble recognition, you will naturally be more open then to gratitude. Because you begin to see when you're humble that your own life doesn't come from you. And there's things you can do to be healthy, and there's things like that you can follow, steps and take care of yourself. And yes, but at the end of the day, your life itself doesn't come from you. It originates somewhere else. There's something mysterious about your own existence, first of all. So, gratitude then, following humility, then just instinctively makes you more open to wonder, because once you realize just where you fall in things, you tend to look up and out a little bit more, away from yourself as if you're the be-all, end-all, and the answers come from you, or that if you can just figure that one little thing out, you'll have your whole life figured out. Well, no, you won't. When's the last time you did, right? No matter how well you've ever got it, figured out or put together, there's always more you don't get. There's always more questions you have, so that humility leads to gratitude, which leads to wonder, to see things with wonder and openness and marvel at your place in the human story, and to then contemplate it, right? Contemplation, which is a deeper kind, it's not just meditation or thinking, it's this deeper contemplation of your role in life and the meaning of your life and what trees mean and what frogs mean and what this just opening and opening and opening, and that's the big sort of doorway that Aquinas, and he describes as in Latin as dilatatio, the dilation of your mind, the dilation, maybe put better, a dilation of your whole being. And you know how when you get those awful drops at the doctor's office, right? You go to the eye doctor, and those eye drops, like, they dilate your pupils and all that light comes in. It can be painful, right? Well, why is that? Because you're not ready for that. You're not used to it. You're not ready for that level of exposure. It's exactly the same thing in the spiritual life. This is why God doesn't just, like, we ask, like, oh, I pray, God, why don't you just reveal yourself to me? Well, that's like asking the sun to just pour all of its rays into your eyeballs. Like, what happens if you stare at the sun for a little while? You'll go blind, right? Well, the sun is just a thing, right? God, though, made the sun. God is the source of all being and existence itself, right? So, God, show yourself to me. Careful with that one, right? Because we would die. So God communicates himself to us in ways we can handle. Through a conversation with a friend, through a bizarre seeming circumstance that just can't be a circumstance, that can't be a coincidence, rather, right? And ultimately what we get through that dilation, when we're opened at that right time, we're opened to that sort of pouring in of grace, of revelation, of purpose, is communion. Communion is the end game of being with not just the force. There's not just a thing, not just some big power on the other side of those doors. There's someone on the other side of those doors. The one you love, that you were made to love, the one who loves you into existence, the one who, through his gift of his own self, his gift of being of himself, right, to you, he is being, and he gives you a share, in a sense, or a manifestation, or like a shadow, in a sense, of that infinite being, and poof, here you are. And you're not like anybody else in the whole wide world. No one else is like you. You are unique and unrepeatable, and we need you in this world, whoever you are listening to this. That's why I do this show, by the way. And that's why I love this book, and why I love this article from Joseph Pierce I'll share with you as well. So things to just think about. I think if I had, as of now at least, a textbook for the gracious guest thing, this whole, like, the website, the podcast, all of it. If I had a textbook that I would recommend to you, it would be Doors in the Walls of the World by Dr. Peter Kreeft. And it's only 122 pages long. So there you go. It's not some big tome. So anyways, thanks so much for tuning into the Gracious Guest podcast today. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm clocking in here right at the average U.S. driver's commute time to work. So hopefully, if wherever you're listening to this, you've enjoyed it. Like I said, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, share it with your friends if you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for future updates. Keep your eyes posted on YouTube as well and other places where I do my thing. So until next time, don't forget to wonder. Take care.